Welcome back. Welcome back. No, I have not forgotten about you. I just was listening to Spotify's wrap up for the end of the year. And in fact, I am incredibly grateful and thrilled that there are actually people listening to this. So thank you all for riding with me as I figure this out. The first 30 or so episodes, I really wanted to dive into as many different topics as possible, experiment with my monotone, and see what kind of guests I could bring on. And I learned a lot. This is not a perfect science at all, but I've been reflecting on being a little bit more thoughtful and intentional with the words that I share and the concepts that I dive into. Today, we'll dive into something just very simple, just my basic reflection on 2024. And I hope all of you had an amazing year. It's important, at least for me, to carve out time to reflect, think, and plan for the next year. And I try to do this in different segments, whether it's monthly, weekly, and sometimes even daily, just depending on what point and stage I am in life. Some of the questions I use for reflection include, how am I different this year than last? Am I richer this year than last year? And that can be in a multitude of things, not just financial. Have I created new content that shares my perspective with the world? Am I in better shape? So did I engage in some kind of a physical challenge this year that really pushed me to the limit and strengthened my mind? Did I create special moments for people in my life? Now, this is something that is very easy for me to miss given how busy I am and the sheer amount of people that I interact with, but nevertheless, it is important. And then overall, all of these things come into a self-analysis, almost a self-audit, which is my annual goal review. And the companion piece to all of this would be the annual status of the world review. So a moment for me to review new tools, technologies, resources, life hacks, just the way I think the world is heading. And this actually has been quite helpful for me, given that in the past I've written about existential threats or monumental shifts in civilization. I wrote about things such as the rise of AI, especially AI that we can't control, pandemics, climate change. I wrote about all these almost 5 years ago. So this is pre-COVID. And I was anticipating a lot of the things, not saying that I knew exactly what was going to happen, but when things happen in our world, it didn't catch me totally off guard. It was like, okay, cool. I've read about this. I've thought about this. So have a lot of other think tanks that focus on existential crises. Now, what do we do? Once I review all of the things that I've done and want to do and the state of everything, that's when I decide the themes of goals for the new year and the different sub goals and sub objectives, whatever I need to do each day to achieve those ultimate themes and major goals. Now, over time, like the goals I think have hopefully become larger and more expansive. And that's not necessarily because of achievement. It's just my threshold for doing things has gone higher. So I know that I am capable of more. And not only that, I should always be stretching for things that are just out of reach that I think I can't achieve. Not things that I know I have 100% failure rate in, but things that just seem out of reach that, oh, okay, that's a big, hairy, audacious goal. So I've been forcing myself to get into this mental headspace where nothing is impossible and really thinking about big things. And that's actually the easy part. The hard part is figuring out systems and schedules that help you achieve those things on the day to day. Now, the choice of a year is an arbitrary choice. I mean, time itself is just constructed by us to mean whatever it is. I tend to follow a semester schedule because I work at a university. So I kind of set goals by semesters, whether it's spring, summer, fall, winter. And that really helps me think about just the flow of energy throughout the year and my available time to do things. So typically, whether or not I set goals at the beginning of the year, they usually last around 6 months. Now, there are bigger goals that might take, a year or two to actually achieve, whether it's investments, for example, or relationships. It's really up to you to determine the timeline and energy to achieve those things. The check-ins on goals also serve a tremendous reflection point, as I mentioned earlier, because you can actually see where you are in life and really start thinking about the future, but reflecting on the past and using that to see whether or not you're on the right track. So there could have been a goal that you set, 6 months, 3 months ago that just doesn't hold true in your life right now. There could be a goal that you've not been working on and that you see as very critical for the future. So it's important to include these moments of self-reflection, I think, to have a more thoughtful and intentional life. Because the worst thing you can do, in my opinion, is, and I see this all the time, a day will pass and you're like, what did I do today? A week will pass. What did I accomplish this week? A month will pass, and so on and so forth. And it's just before you know it, you'll be like, what did I do all year? And even worse, what did I do these last couple of years? And not to say that inaction or enjoyment or relaxation is bad. Not at all. That's not at all the point here. It's if you feel regret or if you feel like you can't pinpoint what you actually did, then that might be a point for you to really think about what you're doing in your day-to-day and whether or not you're getting enjoyment out of life, whether you're actually feeling fulfilled out of life. And I do this every year, but I want to share publicly kind of the goals that I set this year and how things turned out. So 2024, overall, the reflection, unfortunately, I know this is my first chat in a while, and it might sound a little pessimistic, really negative. My overall reflection of 2024 is failure. I felt like I failed in a lot of things that were really important. I miss the forest for the trees or whatever that saying is. And that's a little sad, and we can dive into that in a bit. That being said, this is what 2024 actually looked like for me. So my first theme, my overlying theme for this year, was having a big vision leads to focus, leads to discipline, should lead to routine, which in turn circularly leads to the big vision growing. And then under it, the sub-bullet was time, the time spent on people, things, and events. Is it worth it? So that was kind of the question. So those are the two things that really guided my thought process. Now I had a couple buckets of goals. First and foremost was home. My family was coming back from India, and I wanted to make sure that they had a good home in America. And yeah, I'd say 10 out of 10 on that goal. Got them a crib in a nice neighborhood, very walkable, very quiet, very safe, good grocery store. I think I did a good job there. But if I'm being honest, as I tie it to my overall reflection of failure, I don't know if it's the perfect place for me, which is why I'll have to rethink the living situation. The second major bucket, and it's usually a major bucket every year, is health. The guiding theme here was the default mode network routine. So having a routine that allows me to get rid of distractions and automate all the health procedures in my life. One of the most difficult things is, while health and fitness is a huge priority for me, I'm typically on the go and don't have access to the things that I love to train with. So I had to be creative in terms of how I wanted to diet and train. So this included discipline in the morning and nightly routine, a schedule. So I implemented a schedule not just for my workout routine, but including things such as, this is when I should check email or Slack messages. This is when I should set up calls. That led to themed days. I definitely tried to get 1 gram of protein per pound of body weight every day. It overall results in around 0.8 grams of protein per pound of body weight daily. I really wanted to proof up my neck, my calves, and my abs, especially as I was doing a lot of boxing training. I wanted to limit notifications and screen time, which went down significantly, which was great. I turned on my phone on Do Not Disturb, which was one of the best decisions I made this life. I really took sleep seriously because a lot of people were pointing that out, and I was like, why am I ignoring this? There's no need to glorify the lack of sleep. So I got an Oura Ring, and I tried to maintain a sleep score of 85, which indicates well-rested sleep. I stopped using the ring because I think I developed better sleep habits. I use a sleep mask. I have some supplementation at night that helps me sleep, and I am usually much better about winding down now because my brain kind of is nonstop throughout the day. I really thought about the kind of supplements that I take, and I tried my best to limit intake of sugar, dairy, TV and YouTube, and soda. Martial arts was a big part of the year as well, and I spent quite a bit of time in boxing and Muay Thai. So overall, I'm very happy with the fitness section of my goals. It's something that's very important to me, especially as I get older. I think this is one of the ways to preserve your health and stay sharp as the years pass. The next bucket was media. So sharing my story, letting my personality shine more, especially in the way that it does in real life. So it is actually difficult, I think, to translate your personality through a 2D medium, such as video. But that was one of the major goals I set here. I set up a whole strategy for my brand. I did things that were pretty interesting. So this was the first year that I launched this podcast. I vlogged daily, actually, on YouTube. I covered every day of the accelerator and my personal experience. And I was posting almost daily on LinkedIn and Twitter, which generated thousands of impressions, actually hundreds of thousands of impressions, and a strong amount of inbound traffic. People actually engaged. People were curious about the work that we did. People were curious about the thoughts that I had. And it was actually too much inbound. So I had to slow it down a bit. But it showed that there are people willing to listen, to help out, to be there. And I was surprised at the huge village of people that support me. I can't do this without all of you. And I'm super grateful for all of that. Anything that I do, it really goes back to people. So we talked about all the buckets this year, which were the home, health and wellness, and content. The final bucket was more personal and professional development. So I spent a couple weeks at the fire station in Champaign, riding along with the firefighters in the fire trucks and learning about the profession. I was an EMT in the past. I've always been interested in that line of work, and I learned a ton. And the best thing was most of the firefighters didn't know who I was, and they thought I was just some young kid that was interested in the fire station, which I am, but it led them to treat me like a rookie, which was fantastic. I loved cleaning up the bathrooms. I loved following the chain of command, and I learned a ton, and I think I made a good impression on those folks because of my unyielding positivity and professionalism. And there's a great lesson for me being in a leadership role. Like, I'm the person that almost always gives the orders and the commands, but it showed me that I respect that hierarchy. And yeah, I would be super open to joining that line in the future. I dropped my apparel line, so my merch is out. You can check it out at manuedakara.com. I was really thinking about how to evolve my consulting aspects, so I started coaching, and I was a little wary of it at first. I was wondering what I do have to offer, but there have been some fantastic people that have really been in interesting parts in their life. And the way I look at life, my entire professional career has focused on helping young people navigate uncertainty and build things out of nothing. And this is what I do day to day. I help young people optimize their health, elevate their thinking. And once you have both of those really figured out, the next stage is just using that power that you have to maximize your impact on the world. That's the whole crux of what I do. And the final thing I'm really working on is my book. I really hope I can finish it by the end of the year, but that's like 10 days away. So I'm looking at these goals side by side with 2023, and 2023 had more checklists, a lot more things to accomplish, which kind of set the foundations for what I did in 2024. However, the goals in 2024 became larger. And now I'm looking at 2025, what I've written down, and there are even less goals, which is great, but they're very clear systems to achieve those things, and they're bigger, and I'm super excited. But simultaneously, these last couple years, there was always a push to do something new. So, I was traveling all of East Asia. I went to 40 national parks. I just climbed Kilimanjaro and did Africa this year. But looking at this new year, there actually isn't that much travel on my agenda. There aren't any new fitness challenges. There aren't any brand new social media platforms to join. It's more actually doubling down on some of the things that I enjoy, doubling down on some of the things I already do. And I think that's a fantastic spot to be in. That's what everyone's goal should be, is just for me, a long part of my life was just accomplishment after accomplishment, just this never ending checklist. And people were always like, focus on one thing, focus on one thing. And I couldn't, so I just did it all. And now looking at everything, I'm super happy of all the things that I've achieved. But now I can double down on things that are just systemic. So, for example, this podcast, whether or not there's much change in my life, I hope to continue sharing my thoughts in this format. Fitness, no matter what happens, I'm still going to be working out, hopefully at a high level. My job, I see myself doing it actually for a long time. Not because there's much upward mobility, but it's just self-fulfilling when I think about all the other things I could be doing with my time. And as time passes, that's what it really becomes about. It's just making sure that each day you do things that you like. I spent 2020 and 2021 almost reading a book a week. I liked reading, and I did it. And then life picked up and other priorities came up. But I've returned to reading now because I enjoy reading. Like, you don't need to do things that society tells you to do, on one hand. But people in business were like, Manu, we don't read. Why do you read? We focus on action and doing things. And of course, you got to have an action bias to life. But for you personally, you got to decide what makes sense for you. I do not read business books. I read everything else, philosophy, history, science, because I am concerned with getting more enjoyment out of life in the form of understanding life better. And I think that's what knowledge does. So figure out what your reasons are. And you cannot do everything. That's something that people always tell me. You can't do everything. And that's true to an extent. But more importantly, you can do anything. And that's perhaps even more important. It's a very simple process. Every time I check in on my goals, I list out every single thing that I want to do. And then I theme them, and then I think about the time, and then I cut out stuff, and then I focus on the ones that really matter. Everything else is just a bucket list item. It's not a goal. Bringing it back full circle to my initial thoughts, overall, 2024 was a good year for the goals that I set. However, in reflection, I think it was a failure in terms of relationships, whether it's friendships, loved ones, the culture that I set at work, alumni relations, my family, hiring, being a role model, all these things. This is the first year in which I felt overwhelmed and alone since a long time because I think I was taking on a lot. I was doing a lot and I was pushing myself while neglecting relationships and people. And while I cannot take back anything that has happened this year, I've spent the latter half of this year really pushing myself to think about who I am and what I am. It's definitely been uncomfortable because I've been so definitive on who I am that it took a lot for me to question that. And it's a good thing overall. It's a really, really positive thing because whatever my failures are, I know I cannot change the past, but I can always look towards the future. So setting a few goals, including putting people as a priority more and being more thoughtful and intentional about what I do, that's kind of the energy that I'm bringing on into the new year. And through this process, through this reflection, I've learned to let go of envy and anger as best as I can, to let go of negativity, to try to be as objective as possible, and to hold myself to a higher standard. So in coming years, in coming months, as I reevaluate my goals, a big question, one of the initial questions that I asked that I'm going to add to is, who am I? What am I? And who am I trying to be? This year was definitely a lesson in something I've read from the Bible, specifically from the Gospel of Matthew, the first book of the New Testament and one of the 12 apostles of Jesus. It goes something along like this, which is, for what will it profit a man if he gains the whole world and forfeits his soul? That's a very, very good question, especially for someone who revolves his life around the service of others. In doing so, I might have pushed people away, and that's going to be a good thought as I dive deeper into myself this upcoming year. And the last thought I'm going to leave in terms of failure is not a bad thing. In fact, it's the best teacher. you're never going to get things 100% right in life. All you can do is look back, learn, and try to prepare for the future. And Michael Jordan said it best. I've missed more than 9,000 shots in my career. I've lost almost 300 games. 26 times I've been trusted to take the game-winning shot and missed. I've failed over and over and over again in my life. And that is why I succeed. Thank you all for writing with me. If you want to check out my goal setting template, go to manuedakara.com and click on how to plan your life. I'll see you all in the next one. Happy 2024. Looking forward to 2025.